The name itself, El Niño, comes from a Spanish word meaning the child, as in the Christ child. Basically, in the 1800s, the Spaniards that colonized South America noticed every few years there used to be warm waters appearing off the south coast of west coast of South America, and it was arriving around Christmas time. The waters are usually cold, so when the warm waters arrived around Christmas, they thought it was a present from God's little child, Christ child. That's where the name El Nino comes from.
The current El Nino event is a part of a larger phenomena known as the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which basically takes place in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. During this El Nino event, the sea surface temperatures become warmer than normal by more than 0.5 degrees Celsius.
This basically moves lots of heating that's around New Guinea and Australia in the West Pacific towards the east as the warm waters move east. And this kind of moving of heat source is like shaking a rope tied at one end. So it sets off global disturbances in weather, what we call teleconnections, which affects all countries pretty much, including the poles, and India is one of the countries that gets affected. If the El Nino is strong enough, then June, July, August, the rainfall tends to be weaker than normal.
In India, in specific, El Nino mostly leads to droughts and decreased rainfall patterns. The impacts are already being seen. For instance, the monsoon rainfall this year was delayed by around 8 to 9 days. In fact, the monsoon is currently stalled, and it has been stalled for the past 10 days. In many of the eastern states of India, for instance in Odisha, in Bengal, in Bihar, there are ongoing heat waves, and the major reason for that is the lack of rainfall.
So we expect that maybe there is some compensation happening if IMD is right, but there are many other forecasts from across the world, other operational centers, which are saying there will be a deficit in the monsoon. Either way, June is already deficit, but June only contributes to about 20% of the seasonal total. And agriculture has already been affected in the sense the sowing is about 50% of what it should be by this time. Some of the crops cannot be planted if the rainfall is delayed. We're in a serious deficit.
They'll not be able to sow in time, and even when they will be able to sow their crops in areas where sowing would happen, there would be not a lot of rainfall in the initial days when the crops need rainfall for the initial growth.
Right now, there have been restrictions put on exporting wheat and sugar, not just necessarily the farmers. So as we go forward in July, if the rain doesn't come and we are in serious deficit and crops are wilting, then government will begin to kick in.
of the kharif crops. For instance, rice sowing will be affected, sugarcane sowing in central parts of India is going to be affected, and cotton in the western parts of India is going to be affected. So all these kharif crops are going might yield the sowing might get affected, and therefore the yield of these crops might also get affected. And these are the major kharif crops for India, and therefore they might have a major implications for the economy of India, because 18 to 19% of India's GDP is still dependent on agriculture, and 43% of the rural population is also dependent on agriculture.
Farmers insurance is already a tool that's used to underwrite the risks. So depending on the crop damage, government will try to, this is where the election might play in terms of keeping the farmers happy by providing, help to make up for the damages they may suffer.
So the Indian government has taken certain measures for reducing the risk of farmers regarding certain climate events, especially reduced rainfall and heat waves. For instance, there is the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which is an insurance scheme wherein the farmers can apply for insurance, and most of the insurance premium is basically paid by either the state government or the central government, and they are basically it's subsidized insurance scheme. But there are major problems in this particular scheme because of data gaps. Because of data gaps, the farmers are not able to claim insurance under the scheme, and also the coverage of the scheme currently all across India is not as good, and many farmers are also not aware that this particular scheme can help them in reducing their risk to reduce rainfall and heat waves.